This week we have been talking supermarkets. We've been again Nicola Willis in an unusual move. It has to be said earlier in the week, deciding that she was going to raise certainly the rhetoric in respect of, I guess, making sure that supermarket chains realised that they were really on notice. But will that rhetoric spills into action? We'll see. She's desperate for another trade competitor to come into the New Zealand market, but gee, none of them come yet, and I'm sorry, I'm not holding out much hope for that. But there's one group that have been looking at the practices of supermarkets in this country, and I'm interested in their views on this matter. They are a group of luminaries, including the former Chief Executive of Consumer New Zealand, Sue Chetwin, and they are looking at groceries, the grocery sector, not just in terms of competition between supermarkets, but in the practices and ethics of that particular industry in general. To get their reaction to what's happened this week and whether or not they do think there might be some light at the end of the tunnel, Sue Chetwin joins me now. Sue, lovely to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure. Good morning.
Now, you are a part of something called Better Groceries, or what's the name of your lobby group?
Grocery Action Group.
Oh, Grocery Action Group. Why did you set that up?
Because I think it's a really important issue for all New Zealanders. We are paying some of the highest prices on the planet for groceries, and there's really no need for that. We have a duopoly operating in this country that is making substantial profits, and of course there is nothing wrong with making profit, but when you're doing it in an unfair way and you're making excessive profits, which is exactly what the supermarkets are doing, then something needs to be done about it. And I mean, simply that's what we're trying to do, is to bring down the prices of groceries for all Kiwis. And the Commerce Commission has found that the supermarkets are making excessive profits. The OECD has said they're making excessive profits. So this isn't sort of la land. This is exactly what's happening to Kiwis. We are just paying too much, for our food.
Now, I think the Minister of Finance would agree with you as well. I had John Duffy on earlier this week, so talking about it. His concern was your successor, I think, wasn't he, at Consumer New Zealand? But his concern was that it's going to be devilishly difficult to unravel if they're going to talk about separating wholesalers from retail, the wholesale from the retail, and introducing real competition into the market through regulation, which is why he says Nicola Willis is trying to crank up the rhetoric to try and get the grocery sector to reform itself. In your view, will supermarkets actually reform themselves without government intervention?
Look, so first of all, I'd say, I was quite surprised by Nicola Willis's announcements, and pleasantly surprised by that, because this isn't a government that steps into private competition, I suppose, but she is saying that this is unfair. So and it wouldn't be the first time that something like this has happened. I mean, the telcos were broken up in the early 2000s. It took years. So it's not the first time that we've looked at this. And I think, we are in a position now where the supermarket industry, I mean, there's banks, there's the building industry, and there's supermarkets and arguably the electricity industry as well. So there's four sort of really significant industries that impact on consumers, and the government's concerned by all of this, and rightly so. So I'm reasonably positive that over the next 6 weeks, because that's kind of the time that she's given for the supermarkets to sort of come back to her, and for other people to provide her with more information, that she will do something. Now, whether the supermarkets will do it to themselves, I mean, my fear with that is, of course, that it will be the lowest common denominator for them, that they will say, look, for us we can't continue in the way we are, but we will deliver the least thing that we can give to consumers, and that might not work, and so they will be proved to be right. So I wouldn't trust the supermarkets to come up with the answer for the country. I think the regulators have to have a strong hand in all of that, and economists and consultants, and we can't leave it in the hands of the supermarkets because they will do the least they possibly can.
Oh, I'm sure you're right. I mean, I don't think anybody listening to this will disagree with that basic contention. But given the supermarket duopoly, Woolworths and and Foodstuffs, they are two different organisations. So as you know, one is a pretty easy one. That's Woolworths but the other one, Foodstuffs, is largely owner operated, or as sort of French series of franchise operators, I guess you'd describe it, who have private rights. Is that another reason why you think the government doesn't want to intervene? Because it would clearly, even if it was going to break up the telcos weren't constructed like the the grocery industry, that they would interfere so completely with New Zealanders and their private rights.
Yeah, look, nobody's saying this is easy. Nobody is saying this is easy, but I also would, I would challenge how private some of these rights are, because in the North Island, for foodstuffs, it looks like, I mean, they are owner operated, the foodstuffs brand, so that's essentially New World, Pack and Save, and Four Squares. But there is a sort of complicated ownership structure there. So, that might not be as difficult to unpack as, say, it is in the South Island. But nevertheless, that's a challenge. But I don't think it's one that's insurmountable. And the government, will have to look at all of that. And there have been consultants that have pointed out ways that this could possibly happen. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight. But if you don't start somewhere, then we're just going to carry on paying very high prices, and the supermarkets, the foodstuffs and the Woolworths making excessive profits.
The idea that there would be a third or potentially fourth grocery competitor coming into New Zealand, is that pie in the sky?
Look, I think you can rule out Aldi as a starter. They haven't even opened stores in Tasmania, so
Yeah.
and they've been pretty clear that they don't want to come here. But there may be, there's certainly talk about domestic interests. There are Māori interests. There, obviously, the warehouse has got got an interest in supermarkets. And also, I
Can I
suppose,
just on that, Sue? It's really interesting. I've got one of those warehouses with a grocery section. It doesn't seem particularly competitive. It seems to sort of be setting its pricing at, well, frankly, the other supermarkets down the road.
yeah, so I think it would be fair to say that the warehouse is not concentrating on supermarkets at the moment. They're concentrating on trying to get back to what they were and hoping they can make profits from that. But certainly one of their biggest shareholders, Sir Stephen Tyndall, is still interested in supermarkets. So, uh, I mean, they could be part of it, but also if there was a forced divestment, of say the brands of New World and Pack and Save had to be competitive, then that is one way of introducing another supermarket to the country just in itself.
You've also been talking, this Grocery Action Group is interesting because you formed, I think, at the start of last year.
Yeah.
You've got a series of luminaries amongst you. Obviously, yourself, former head of consumer in New Zealand. You've got Deborah Hart, who currently chairs the Consumer Advocacy Council. I think she's had a lot to do with retirement villages as well. Gilbert Peterson, he comes out of the Employer Manufacturers Association, so I mean, he's certainly no lefty. So you've got a series of luminaries. I see you've even got Nanai Mahuta there as well. Um, Although the six of you have formed as a sort of, if you like, governorship model, how do you work? I mean, obviously you talk to media and things like that, but how do you affect change? Do you lobby government ministers? on a regular basis?